All right, so I don't know if this is going to make sense. I'm just kind of freestyling, so forgive me, I guess. Yeah. Film is an art. Movies are not an art, but film is, and there is a clear difference between a movie and a film. But that leads to the oh so existential and completely asshole-ish question of what is art. And I'm not going down that road. So I guess that also raises the question of whether or not I think I'm an artist. I mean, I want to make films. I want to make great films, and I really think I can. But does that mean I think I'm this great artist, some sort of second coming? Absolutely not. No. And I mean, even if I did, do you think I'm going to admit that right now? But I will say that most of the time, I don't think I see films in quite the same way that my peers do. And most of the time, it makes me feel like the odd man out. I believe in stories. I believe stories are vitally important to the human existence. I mean, seriously, I do. As people, I think we need food, shelter, water, love, and a good story. I mean, if we didn't, why was it that thousands of years ago people were memorizing these epic poems? Minstrels who couldn't even read or write were going from town to town telling everyone from peasants to royalty these stories. And then we had books, and then plays, and now films. Some people may be having an absolute fit right now because how dare I compare cinema to great literature? How dare I compare cinema to the theater? Well, I hate to break it to you, but the stories are all the same. We're telling these same stories over and over again through different mediums. Father-son relationships, losing a first love, coping with death. The Lion King was Hamlet. It's all the same. We may have cell phones and Facebook and a fancy high-priced educations, but when it comes down to it, we can't avoid our death, we can't avoid breakups, we can't avoid tension, and neither could the people in the 1600s. That reality doesn't make stories any less important. In fact, I think it makes them more important, and although the screenwriter may be the one who actually creates the stories, the poet, so to speak, it's the director who's the minstrel, the one telling it to the masses. The director has to be the one person on set dedicated to the story. The cinematographer, the actors, the producers can worry about their paycheck, their reel, winning a big award, but the director can't. I mean, a director can certainly win a big award, you know what I mean. But the role of the director has kind of veered from this, just from a completely historical standpoint. And now I'm going to get into some film theory, so watch out. But I will say I'm not going to argue that Spielberg, Coppola, or Scorsese are terrible directors because I would be wrong and probably shanked in a parking lot somewhere. But historically, they changed directing. They were the film brats, the first generations of directors that went to film school, heavily studied technique and film history, and maybe that's why they were able to make such great films. But now I think that's all I learn, the technical things. The students who make the coolest crane shots or use the most exotic locations get the most praise. But that doesn't mean they're making the best films. Most of the time, I would argue film students are even willing to sacrifice story for a nice shot. If directors were at least given some of the training actors were, I think films would be better on the whole. Because good acting's pretty ironic. A lot of it isn't even acting. It's using oneself, true emotions, reactions, putting oneself in a given set of circumstances and just seeing what comes out of it. It isn't putting on a false persona or being a totally new person. It isn't acting with a capital A. So how do you get this A to be lowercase? I don't mean to sound presumptuous, but I think a lot of it comes through learning about yourself. What makes you tick, what memories have affected you, but also knowing about other people, people from different backgrounds, different cultures, talking with them, understanding you and the world around you. I mean, how are you supposed to direct a scene where two people fall in love if you can't understand what that feels like? How can you direct an honest conversation if you've never had one? I guess long story short, why aren't life experiences fuel for the director anymore? Why have they been placed second to f-stops and apertures? Shouldn't life experiences, self-reflection, observation play a role in the film education too? I mean, if our professors told us that emotions and experiences were important too, we wouldn't need people like Judith Weston writing books like Directing Actors that make talking to people, formulaic. Weston reminds the young, inexperienced director to never say things like, be more sad, be bigger, give a nice smile when you say this line. She gives us so many things we can't do or say without running the risk of completely destroying, devastating, creatively murdering our actors. And she replaces this very rigid list of no-nos with another very convoluted list of must-dos, action verbs, facts, all very carefully explained techniques with their own sub-clauses and fine prints. I mean, since when did communication become so hard? Or maybe she just has to explain everything so cut and dry because that's how we're now taught to think. If directors cultivated themselves like actors, acknowledged that they have facets to themselves that make them complex, just as all good film characters are complex, and allowed themselves to freedom to know and to experience as much of the world as they possibly could, they probably wouldn't even commit many of the egregious sins that Weston talks about. If you allow yourself to understand your own emotions, you will understand that someone can't tell you how to feel. They can't just say, be sad now. So what brings on sadness? Bad news, something startling or unexpected, your father just died. Weston would call that a fact. This sounds all very preachy, I'm sure, but I assure you I didn't intend it to be that way. I mean, perhaps I'm also reminding myself that it isn't the director's job to think like a camera. They have cinematographers and DPs and camera people to worry about that. If you understand anything about life, and nothing too complex or profound here, you understand it isn't scripted, it is unexpected, and if you want your films to mimic or even vaguely hint at reality, you can't play a result either. You can't decide what the actor is going to do or feel at any moment. You can't plan their experience, just as you can't plan your own. But you can guide their perspective, you can alter their perception, you can manipulate it a bit. And actually, as I say this, I guess I am mostly reminding myself that the technical pizzazz will be fueled by a solid story. Don't put the cart before the horse, I believe the expression is. Because even though I really, truly believe in everything I've been saying, I know I get caught up in the film school mentality. I want to prove that even though I think the game is flawed, I can play it and I can play it well. I've left in some sequences that I didn't think were funny or true to life or remotely believable because the composition or lighting was easy on the eyes. Because it looked really pretty. But ultimately, I leave knowing that there is a black spot on my film, that it could have been more, and I should have just been true to my instincts and to what little I have been able to discover about the world around me in my 20 years of life. Long story short, communicate honestly. Don't screen your emotions. Open your mind to whatever experience comes your way. Even say hi to strangers. It'll all pay off on the set. Acting is about learning to live. Directing is about learning to talk. So talk and live, and make sure not to turn the personal and the intimate into a series of techniques and lists. Weston's do's and don'ts for communicating with actors all have their roots in natural human behavior. Movies aren't math and science, so don't treat them like they are. Then again, what do I know, right? I'm just talking on a webcam, not making a movie.